I'm Diana Falzone for 4for4 Science, where we discuss 4 science topics in only 4 minutes. We're amazing. NASA is funding a concept to turn asteroids into spaceships so we can mine them. So, Sophie, essentially asteroids would fly themselves?
That's exactly what would happen. So asteroids have lots of natural resources in them, like gold and platinum, and if we want to mine them, it's not really effective to go to the asteroid. So a company called Made in Space, a 3D printing company, has proposed that you would send a robotic ship to the asteroid. It would 3D print a navigation and propulsion system, and then the asteroid would fly itself to a site where it could be mined. Wow. And they just did get funded by NASA.
You know, when I first saw this, I was like, this has got to be science fiction. But no, it's serious stuff. I mean, you know, we've got the NASA funding. And kind of recently, the Luxembourg, of all places, allocated over $200 million of public funds to asteroid mine. And their whole idea is that they want to pull a lot of private companies for space exploration into Luxembourg, give them a framework, make them a hub, and do just this type of thing. It's really amazing, and clearly it's happening.
I mean, as a physicist, I gotta say it's a wonderful idea, but it sounds problematic in more than one way, because you're gonna have to fly at the same speed as the asteroid to be able to attach a propulsion system to it to be in relative zero motion, right? And
so, Dr. Deborah, you're saying this is highly not feasible. We'll just have to see how it pans out.
Yeah, we'll see.
An MIT professor wants to release mice who can spread Lyme disease onto Nantucket due to how rampant the disease is on the island. Dr. Deborah, how would this help other than people being extremely annoyed by the mice?
So this is a really clever idea. Yes, mice could be annoying, but the disease is so rampant in Nantucket that what he's doing is he's going to genetically engineer mice that cannot be carriers of the disease. So what happens is a tick, when they're young, they bite the mouse, they get Lyme disease, and then they bite a human and they transfer it. And that's how we get the disease. But by getting these genetically engineered mice that cannot spread the disease, the ticks will bite more of them because there will be 10,000 of them. And then, because they can't be carriers, the tick will not get the disease, and it's going to reduce
It's a genius way. It's a genius way of doing this.
I mean, what are the alternatives to this? I mean, like reducing deer populations, which makes sense, but it's maybe not feasible everywhere, so it's good that there's an alternative.
Sophie?
Well, one thing I would wonder is whether this method could be effective in some place other than Nantucket. Nantucket's an island, which means our genetically engineered mice are going to pretty much stay in the location where we want them. But I wonder if we would have to develop a different technique for reducing Lyme disease elsewhere.
It's just important that we reduce it at all, because you're hearing so many cases coming out per year. A 500-year-old shipwreck loaded with gold was found in the Namibia desert. James, how did treasure hunters miss this? You would think for years and years and years, everyone would be after this gold.
Well, the funny thing about it is that it wasn't always in the desert. And basically, it was kind of just sunk off the coast. And basically, this was buried underneath the ocean floor. But what happened was a mining company basically created a man-made lagoon in that area, and basically up came this shipwreck containing loads and loads of gold, all sorts of different things, elephant tusk. It was kind of an amazing find, and they're calling it one of the most significant shipwreck discoveries of its type.
One thing that I think is really neat about this is that it was a very well-preserved ship, and they think one of the reasons is because it was carrying like 40,000 pounds of copper ingots. And copper is toxic to a lot of marine life. In small quantities, it's not, but you know, if you've got like 40,000 pounds of copper in there, they're going to want to avoid that area, and so they didn't eat up the scraps from the shipwreck.
I think it's incredible that it was so well preserved for 500 years. And also, I gotta say, the Namibian government got to keep all the gold and all that, even though Portugal had some right because it was a ship from the estate, from the king. So that's pretty cool.
Well, there could be some sour grapes there, too. A 19th century Washington, D.C. garden aligns with the solstice sun. Sophie, can you explain what's going on here?
Right. So there is a garden called Lafayette Square, or Lafayette Park, and it has a statue in the center and 4 walkways going away from the statue. So if you stand at that statue on the summer solstice, you'll see the sun rise over one walkway and set over a second walkway. If you stand there for the winter solstice, the sun will rise over a third walkway and set over the last walkway. So the walkways and the sun align, and that was just discovered by an Italian physicist.
I mean, this begs the question, like, why was it set up this way? I mean, it feels like something like out of a Dan Brown novel or something. But it may just be that, like, when they were planning it, this is kind of how they used the sun for their alignments. I mean, there are examples of this elsewhere in the world, like the Taj Mahal has a lot of this type of thing. But it's not thought that the designer kind of visited the Taj Mahal and like that. So there's clearly a story behind this. I'd like to know a bit more.
Yeah, this really begs the question of whether this happened at random or not, or it was designed. So architects of parks have a lot of variables to consider when designing a park, and it's very much like Neil deGrasse Tyson finding henges, like Manhattan henge.
Well, we should all go visit there and see if we can ever see the summer or winter solstice. Now you know what we think. Tell us what you think using the hashtag 444 Science.